Hi, I'm Roger Aguinaldo, and welcome to the M&A Advisor podcast. Since 1998, the M&A Advisor has been the definitive source dedicated to recognizing achievement, delivering unrivaled thought leadership, and connecting the world's mergers and acquisitions elite. We help you sharpen your edge and accelerate your success in deal making. Whether you're an ambitious new player or a market veteran, this podcast provides masterclass strategies, unvarnished stories, and vital lessons from the industry's influential figures. Before we launch into this episode, be sure to follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and subscribe to our essential M&A Alerts email newsletter. Find all the links below. Your engagement fuels the deal-making community. Now let's get into the transaction.
Thanks very much, everybody, and thanks for that introduction. My name is Richard Goldman. I'm a managing director with Joel Frank, a strategic communications firm that provides counsel around financial and other special situations, including restructurings. We have with us on the panel today two esteemed members of the restructuring community. They need no introduction, but we're going to allow them to introduce themselves anyway. So, Lisa, want to begin?
You want me to start? Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Donahue, and I grew and ran the Alex Partners Global Restructuring practice for about 25 years. Oh, gosh, I hate saying that out loud.
Good morning. I'm Greg Milmoe. I'm a lawyer. I am with Greenberg Traurig. Have been doing restructurings for a disgustingly long time, 56 years, but who's counting? And still realize I have a lot to learn.
Excellent. Well, as Lisa, Greg, and I were preparing for today's panel, we were trying to think about ideas and thoughts that might come of interest. And as we were tossing things around, the common theme that kind of came up from a restructuring standpoint was uncertainty, and kind of the influence that uncertainty that we're dealing with in today's market has had on the 2025 restructuring landscape, and that we think will go forward into 2026. And this uncertainty takes many forms, whether it be with tariffs, immigration policies, consumer sentiment and behavior, interest rates, and a lot of other factors. And one of the industries that we wanted to start with was renewables and electric vehicles in particular, just given I know Greg has had some direct experience with that. We've seen a lot of recent filings in the renewable space, Sonova, Mosaic, Pine Gate Renewables, and other renewable energies. And the vehicle industry is by no means safe from that. So, Greg, maybe you'll kick us off in what you're seeing with electric vehicles and the impact of uncertainty on that industry.
When was the last time you saw an electric vehicle on the road that wasn't a Tesla? Is the problem. I think as we were talking about it, Lisa pointed out that the ultimate problem was lack of consumer enthusiasm. But in the specific situations, and I think there have been 26 bankruptcies of electric vehicle companies in the last 24 months, which is really kind of astonishing. The issue has often been that they had wonderful startup capital. They hired brilliant engineers, came up with amazing prototypes, and then to turn those great designs into revenue, they needed to produce cars, and oh, by the way, it required a boatload of capital to do that, just as a confluence of factors were hitting worldwide, including the new administration damping down on electric vehicles in general, alternative energy in particular, and that capital just wasn't there. A lot of companies have been picked up for distress, sometimes fire sale prices, and the question remains, what's going to happen to those? Lisa, what's your...
So I think when you say renewable, it encompasses just a massive notion of different types of things. It encompasses nuclear, wind, solar, electric vehicles, etc. And when you think about vehicles, I do think that in the U.S., the industry was ahead of the consumer. And I think that the industry from an OE automobile manufacturing, they were ahead. They certainly hadn't thought through kind of the infrastructure, the chargers, fast charging, et cetera. And, you know, your point about the cost and the capital, you've got a Tesla that has some government support, but they're competing with Chinese BYD. And when the automakers actually have gotten their hands on one of those cars and the technology, they realize how far ahead the Chinese are from an electric vehicle perspective than the U.S. models are. So if we want to stay in the game, we are going to have to think of some sort of government support. On a solar and wind perspective, the notion that intermittent power is going to be satisfactory for baseload, it just doesn't make sense. The storage isn't there for it. Nuclear, which I don't think it's any secret, I'm a big nuclear advocate, is number one, supported by the administration, will be supported by the government, and does make sense from a renewable, clean power perspective, and also provides baseload. So I think it's a mixed bag, depending on what technology you're talking about, what use you're talking about, and what area of the world you're talking about.
On the flip side, I guess, of the renewable coin is the oil and gas industry, which I think, again, in our discussions and prep, we've noticed some trends that are kind of aligning there, especially with the price, you know, of oil where it currently stands. Maybe you can fill us in a little bit on what you're seeing in that space and maybe what we expect coming down the pike if things continue as is.
Yeah. I mean, oil and gas, look, it's a boom or bust industry, kind of like shipping, right? They rise and fall based on commodity pricing and movement of goods. And for oil and gas right now, the price is low. They're forecasting it to remain low, largely because of supply. So what that means from a drilling perspective is when it becomes uneconomic, and their break even used to be about 220. I'm not sure exactly what it is now. My guess is it's probably a little bit lower. That means they'll stop drilling because it becomes uneconomic. So then you think about the whole ecosystem that supports oil and gas drilling, all the oil field services, et cetera. So for the foreseeable future, right now, it looks as though there's going to be opportunity from a restructuring and distressed perspective because it's capital intensive, lots of infrastructure, commodity based, lots of supply, meaning there'll likely be some shut-in wells.
Well, the other thing that appeals to me is that there's something there. We talk about and are seeing so many companies that have market valuations in the billions, and when you stop the wheel for a minute, you realize there's nothing for creditors or others to latch onto. Oil and gas and its affiliated industries almost always have got something tangible or at least valuable intangible rights that can be resuscitated. And I think that's one of the areas that I'm looking and expecting to see some significant activity, certainly over the next year to 18 months.
I mean, I think the last time, and obviously you can correct me, that we saw a significant amount of concentrated oil and gas restructurings was probably around 2014, 2015, that time of year. Obviously, we don't have our crystal balls with us today, and we can only see so far into the future, but do we think that what is currently going on in the market with the administration, other factors at play, we could see that level of restructuring in the industry, or would it take, kind of many other factors, to come to play as well?
Now we're trying to predict the level of restructuring. Look, I don't think oil and gas is going anywhere for a long time, despite the best efforts of, moving toward energy transition and green energy. There simply isn't enough power out there to power the demand and the additional computing needs, particularly when you think about the hyperscalers. So as long as the the price of natural gas remains low, there will be trouble in that sector while they have to resize and think very carefully on how they deploy their capital and what they do as far as rig count and actual drilling. So I do think that there'll be some distress. As I said, I believe that this is an industry that is going to be around for a long time because it simply cannot go away from an infrastructure perspective and an energy need perspective. And I think it's also been a remarkable industry that has been able to think about how to position themselves really well with the changing, not just administrations and policy, but public sentiment and what they're doing as far as moving toward energy transition and diversifying their assets. So I do think there'll be select opportunity, but I can't tell you,
Of course.
Oh, we come back to where you started, Rich, with the uncertainty factor. One of the reasons the electric vehicle industry got into trouble was that they believed there was a huge political and economic imperative that was willing to invest in a major way and was trying to promote their existence. Now, politics are always a very difficult thing to predict, but it's tough to imagine how somebody is going to make the decision to invest in something that is tied to natural gas, or, as we were kicking around before, tied to nuclear energy, which requires the huge new infusion of capital. Just trying to be able to plan with any likelihood of reliability has become a challenge. I'm a plumber when it comes to restructuring. I look to Lisa to figure out to say what should we do, and then I and others try to put together a legal structure to implement that end. As we were talking the other day, Lisa, you had a view that maybe it wasn't so hard to figure out what to do, but
how to do it. I mean, it was in the context of AI, and we were talking about where kind of the value equation is when you think about AI so quickly coming up with your answers. And I was telling them a story that, listen, sometimes you're sitting as CEO, CFO, whatever your role is in these companies, and lots of people around the table know what has to happen. Sometimes it's very obvious. The real challenge and the real value is the ability to actually make it happen and to know what steps you have to take and how to drive change and how to motivate people and build teams and get the right skill sets together. Where we should be is often very obvious. The how we get there and actually making sure you get there is the part that, in my mind, AI is not going to be able to replace. And thinking about, this was kind of going on the future of professional services. It was like, in the beginning, a lot of us, and bankers, consultants, lawyers, etc., get paid for the thinking process of coming up with the solutions, and then additionally get paid with the implementation of what you're doing. With generative AI and these large language models, the what should you do comes much, much faster. The value is how do you do it, and when do you do it, and can you actually deliver what you say you're delivering? That's the context of what we were talking about, not me saying I always know the answer. It was more...
based on my experience, you generally did, but that's...
Well, yeah, but no, but it's more the context of sometimes everyone knows the answer, but it's how do you actually do it and how do you actually get there?
My early experience as a restructuring lawyer, I was always the guy who got to fire the CEO. Why? Because the CEO had been saying for 6 quarters, we don't have a problem. We're just a little tight on our covenants. This quarter, everything will be fine. Next quarter, it was a willing suspension of reality that as often as not led companies to the abyss. I don't see that happening as much anymore.
You know, it's funny. I've thought a lot about leadership and how it's evolved, maybe post-COVID. And if you think about what happened in COVID, and it seems surreal now that it even actually happened and that we all were shut in and nobody, you didn't have human contact for a while. But I think what that did for leaders and for CEOs and boards of directors is they realize they have to be much more nimble thinking. They have to be more flexible. They have to have flexible capital and flexible balance sheets and think about what before then would have been an impossible scenario. So your point about kind of delusional management teams, I agree with you. I think we come across much more sophisticated management teams because we've all gone through COVID and because no one could have envisioned that type of situation really ever, yet it happened. So game theorying and thinking about stuff that you would never imagine happening and thinking about resolution and what your different scenarios, I think it's taken on a whole new level.
Speaking of, impact on the workforce, obviously touched upon AI and the potential impact there. The immigration reform and immigration policy that has implemented over the past year has certainly had an impact on a number of industries. One that we spoke about in particular was home building and roofing and all sort of, to Lisa's point, the ecosystem that, evolves around and supports that industry being impacted by immigration reform and lack of workforce and things of that nature. Any kind of anecdotes that you'd like to share or thoughts on, again, the impact that industry has seen and going forward?
Well, kind of looking around the room and checking the guest list, I think that the participants have probably had more hands-on direct experience with these fallout issues. The anecdote we were talking about the other day was my. I have the foolish desire to create a swimming pool at a home, and it started in April, and it's not yet done. And the reason for that, I'm told, the latest reason for that is that the immigration raids the fear of immigration raids has kept people from showing up to work. But I think, Rich, you identified agriculture, big agriculture in particular, but you identified with the building industries an area that I think we're seeing that kind of fallout.
Immigration policy and comprehensive immigration policy really is a national imperative, because the fact is, without immigration, the U.S. doesn't grow. We need immigrants. It's what our foundation is on. It's what we're built on. And when I say comprehensive, it's legal immigration is really where we need to get to. But it's going to continue to impact home building, hospitality, restaurants.
Well, and then you have the genius tax on the $100,000 for people coming in on the, I forget the number, B visas that were coming in regularly to supplement high-tech companies. Haven't seen enough time go by yet to see what actual impact that's had, but we've got to speculate that it will have an impact.
But when you think about immigration, and just to broaden it, not necessarily immigration, but when you just said the genius tax, that kind of spurred a thought. One of the challenges that we have from a workforce perspective is that when I told a story, we were talking about impediments for people for, upward mobility in this society that we've built. And I told a story about it at Alex Partners. When I ran Umbro, I met this amazing woman. She spoke like 9 languages. She grew up in Luxembourg, and anyone who knows people from Luxembourg, they tend to have a lot of languages just because of where they sit. And she was by far one of the smartest people I've ever encountered, and she was my controller. So when I moved over to the UK to continue the restructuring, I brought her with me. She took on the German controlling role. So not only did she have to do it in German, she had to know German GAAP. So just amazing. And when we finished the successful turnaround, I went to Alex Partners and I said, you know what, I really want to hire this woman. She didn't have a college degree. They wouldn't hire her because she didn't have a college degree, despite the fact that she had just worked for me for 2 years, knocked it out of the park. So what I did is I hired her as a IC, and I used her everywhere I went. I brought this woman with me, so I still got the benefit of her. But my point was, there's barriers to people that don't have specific qualifications. And one of the things that a lot of the AI companies are doing is hiring high school grads. They're not waiting for a college degree. They're going for smart people that have an ability to learn, have an interest in technology, and they're trying to bring more people into the workforce, which I think is brilliant because we need more people in the workforce, and we need more people that aren't, barred by maybe they couldn't go to college. Who knows? Whatever reasoning they chose doesn't mean they can't be high performing and a great employee. So I think that's something that as a country we really need to wrestle with.
Yeah, interesting the lengths to which AI may disrupt, various institutions in this country and stigmas and, what has kind of been a foundation for many years. I know we're almost out of time here, but one topic that we discussed that I think is very interesting is just consumer sentiment, right? And consumer behavior and habits. I know, Lisa, you're watching for a report that will soon be, filed and released that you think will have at least a little bit of insight into what the future might hold, or, at least give some context as to how consumers are feeling these days. Walk us through that a little bit.
Well, I'm sure everybody looks for the Michigan CPI that comes out, right? And that is a good indicator on, and obviously it's backward looking, so it's not forward, but I think it will be important when the Fed meets to see if they're going to hold steady or if they come forward with, another cut. The consumer powers our economy, and there are signs that they're starting to pull back. So I think that will be a huge indicator of where we'll start to see distress, because once the consumer pulls back, it's not just, traditional retail. It then goes to that whole supply chain of, transportation, shipping, trucking, home building. Once they pull back and they close their purse, which hasn't really happened in several years, that may be the beginning of a lot more. Look, every down has an up, and every opportunity or every risk has an opportunity. So that's the index that I'm looking at next.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's gone to a supermarket is aware of the prices for not necessarily fancy stuff, but just ordinary bread and butter kinds of provisions. And one wonders how people who are getting by on what used to be a normal salary and a regular weekly paycheck are managing to deal with that. Certainly, it's not translating into people being comfortable buying homes, which flows through to the home builders and the developers. The mortgage rates are coming down, but they're not down so low that anybody feels he's got to rush out and get a mortgage quick. In general, it's a dampening, I think, of the overall economy. We just sort of switching gears for a second. We used to use restructuring and bankruptcy in particular to try to deal with societal ills, things like mass torts, asbestos liabilities. More recently, the opioid cases. And it has become apparent that procedurally the bankruptcy court's wings have been clipped in this area. They're no longer able to engineer settlements that are binding. The Supreme Court essentially put an end to the most powerful weapon, which was the forced consent, the deemed consent. And so I think that we're going to see fewer of those kinds of cases, fewer Boy Scouts, fewer parishes. It simply won't be the same effective tool that it seemed to be for 35 or 40 years.
Interesting. I see we are literally seconds out of time, but I both want to just give you an opportunity to kind of give some final thoughts, to the audience, given you have seen, so much and been involved in so many different situations over the course of, your careers. Anything, final that you'd like to say just about what we might see or what might be on the horizon for 2026, and even beyond?
It's funny, you look at that clock and now it's telling us we're 10 seconds, 11 seconds, 12 seconds over time. So I'll go really fast. Look, I think retail is a perpetual favorite. As I mentioned, I think there'll be some distress in oil and gas. I think there'll be opportunity across the whole power and infrastructure sector, not necessarily distress, but combinations and consolidations. Turn it over to you.
We'll always have fraud. We'll always have incompetence, and we may still have ambitions outreaching the reality of being able to implement the ambition. Those are things that have driven the restructuring in this country for years, and I suspect will continue. I'm not involved with this latest fraud case, so I have no particulars about it, but it's kind of the same thing that was going on in the 1920s, where somebody was leveraging one pool of oil or one silo of vegetable oil and getting 4 different loans secured by that. Well, the techniques change, but the motivation and the implementation don't change all that much.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate Lisa, Greg, you guys coming, giving us your thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We hope today's episode delivered actionable intelligence. We want to hear from the field. Share your questions or insights, leave a message on your favorite platform, or email us at editor@maadvisor.com. To secure your steady feed of premium M&A content, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and subscribe to our M&A Alerts email newsletter. Find the links in the description below or visit us directly at our website at www.maadvisor.com. I'm Roger Aguinaldo, founder and CEO of the M&A Advisor. Thank you for being part of the M&A Advisor community. Until next time, stay decisive, stay connected, and happy dealing.